to another faction preview video for Gridwars 2.0. Today we're going to look at the Borderlands faction. Now the Borderlands faction was an add-on in Gridwars 1.0. They were not new models for the campaign, but instead were actually all models from their Patreon of November 2020 actually, which interestingly enough, from my point of view, that was the first month of Patreon that I actually had joined for Cyberforge. It was mostly a Mad Max style of Wastelanders, and it just caught my eye, and I felt like I needed to have them, and I bought into that Patreon before I even had a resin printer. I didn't get my resin printer till early 2021, but I knew I was going to get a resin printer eventually, and I knew I wanted all the models from that Patreon. And eventually, Gridwars 1.0 came out, and I jumped over some of the core or main factions just to print the Borderlands because I thought they were pretty cool. And they are pretty unique in the lore of Gridwars. There's not a lot of lore provided for them as they are an add-on faction, but they feel very different from the rest of the gangs. They have a little less hacking appeal or cyberpunk look to them. They're very much more, Mad Max inspired or Wastelanders, but they have some really cool looks, and they feel like in the theme of the game they would not live as part of Titan City, but would be an external threat that is very different from what the day-to-day of the grid entails. Now, in Grid Wars 2.0, they have an updated faction abilities. So they have what's called Salvage Strike, which all scavengers, which is a keyword for the Borderlands crew that at this point it contains all of the faction. So all the scavengers have access to a quick engineering project that costs 1 material. And Salvage Strike, your next attack this turn gains +1 die and +1 armor penetration. So that can be very situational, but very good to use. You may find you have a unit that's near death, and there's no point in having him die with extra material on him that's just going to go to waste. And his other engineering projects maybe is not beneficial in the moment, but an extra die is always great. And if you're fighting someone who has a lot of armor, the penetration is great as well. Another ability of the Borderlands is Scrap Armor. So in a defense roll, scavengers can spend any number of material tokens to change that many armor results to saves. So that's another great one. You can use that, when it serves you best. You can see your roll and then pay the materials. I'm getting a little stumble in my words there as I think about it, but yeah, you can look at your roll first, and if spending the materials will save your character, why wouldn't you do it? It's always a great option to have. And finally, they have the Junkyard. So during the game, if any scavenger has more material tokens than their engineering statistic, place the excess materials in the Junkyard beside the grid. When an allied scavenger unit is destroyed, put 1 material in the Junkyard. All scavengers can use materials from the Junkyard as their own at any time. So that's just a great way to have access to a little extra materials, especially for a faction that really needs to make use of them. So in Grid Wars 2.0, every character starts with materials equal to their engineering statistics. So some of them will have 3 and 4, a lot of them have 1 and 2, some may have none. The only way for most factions to gain more material tokens is to destroy neutral units, the sentry guns that you find on the grid. If you can destroy those, they'll drop a material and you can pick it up. But at least here, when your scavenger units are destroyed, you get an additional material put into the Junkyard that you can spend, and so it just gives you more opportunity to launch your engineering capabilities or make use of the abilities you have, like for the defense roll, turning armor results to saves. So that's their abilities. The theme of the Borderlands is, again, like I said, very Wasteland, Mad Max-ish. It's pretty cool to see how they differ from the cyberpunkish units. And we're going to go through the cards one by one here, and I think you'll find them pretty cool as well. This faction may be the most, have the most inspired from pop culture units. You'll see a lot of them, and we'll break them down as we go through, although they will be pretty obvious. So let's look at the cards here. All right, kicking off the Borderlands crew, we have the Angel of Sound. Now, this guy's model is clearly inspired from, I guess it's called the Coma Doof Warrior in Mad Max Fury Road. I had to Google that name to see him, but yeah, he's featured on the war rig that is chasing down Max and Furiosa as part of Mortem Joe's crew, and he's constantly playing guitar while attached to some sort of like bungee cords at the same time, and through the whole chase scene, he's constantly playing guitar with this big wall of speakers behind him. So yeah, there's a picture of him here that I will throw up, and in addition to having a lot of similarities with the guitar and the speakers, they both have flame weapons. As the base part of the weapon here is a flamethrower, which represents the character in the movie. So going on past that, we have the stats of engineering with 2, 2, and 2 for hacking, engineering, and IDS across the board. He has no melee mastery, but he does have a mastery of 1 for ranged attacks. He has a standard movement of 4, which I would not have been too surprised to see him go down to 3 with all the weight he's carrying on his back, but I think competitively it makes sense to keep him at 4. 1 armor and 5 health. He's got his passive ability here, the show must go on. So the Angel of Sound can change all energy results to hits and saves in all attack and defense rolls. So you really don't have to put much energy on him to keep him going. He can run without it, or and constantly alter his rolls as necessary. He's got his base wave, which is a range of 7, only 2 attack dice, 1 armor penetration, 1 damage. Not the greatest attack, but I prefer the flaming rift. Now it is the large template, so that is good. It has the ability to hit a lot of guys at once, and it's got a higher attack, so I prefer this over, despite it's not having as far of range, I would probably use this more often. And he does have the one ability that costs an action and an energy, so the only reason to ever give him energy would be to use this Reckless Pogo attack. And this ability is choose a unit in a 6 hex radius. That unit and all units adjacent to it gain a melee attack action in any order you choose. So if I have a couple of guys, or not if you have a couple of guys surrounding an enemy character, you can use this Pogo action to get multiple attacks at once. And finally, he has the Volume Amplifier. This changes his base wave into a template weapon, which is a range 7 beam until the end of the turn. And it can be used as if you were not in combat. So you can use it as if it were handy, or if you're locked in combat, and shoot from your straight front arc through the enemy and through any enemies behind him. It makes it a little bit better considering it's only got the 2 attack dice, but you can always change all energy results for virtually free, so it's got that going for it. Overall, this model might be a little expensive for what I think it does, but it also has a super cool factor that, like, this is a model that grabs your eyes if you see this on the board for the first time and someone sees you playing it at a demo. This is one of the characters that I think will grab the attention of the viewer. I love the sculpt. There's nothing bad about his stats. I just think some of the other members of the Borderlands factions may outshine him. Alright, next up in the faction we have Liza Thorne here, who is inspired by Charlize Theron's character Furiosa in Mad Max Fury Road. She doesn't have the metal arm, and it's a little bit different. She has more hair, but the style is still very similar in the name alone. Charlize Theron to Liza Thorne makes it not much of a stretch to see where the inspiration comes from. She has a 3 in engineering, 1 hacking, 1 hacking defense, 1 in both attack masteries, 4 for movement, 1 for armor, and 5 for health. Her passive ability is that Liza has +1 armor for each material she has. So you start with however many engineering you have is how many materials you start with. So she'll start with 3. So from the start of the game, she'll have 4 armor. And I can see myself trying to keep her at 3 or 4 armor for most of the game. She does have an ability down below to spend some of her materials, but I would try to hold off on that in the early game. It just gives her such a greater level of survivability. So she also has this hit and block attack, which after the attack, if you have no shields, gain a shield. So that's even more survivability that Liza Thorne will have. She'll have all those armor, but the additional shields will have to come off before her health. She also has the self-made shotgun here, which has 4 attack dice and only range 4. But if you attack someone at range 2, you add an additional 4 dice. So that's going to be a very powerful roll of 4 dice, but only if they are exactly 1 hex away, so at range 2. Because if they're at range 3, it's just going to be the 4 dice, and if they're at range 1, this weapon doesn't have handy, so she won't be able to attack someone in melee. But for those moments when you can get someone at range 2, it'll be worth it to drop those 8 dice. And finally, she has the Desert Whip, which is also range 4, but on damage, move the target up to 3 hexes towards you and apply stun to it, and then gain a melee attack action against it. So this is basically, if you think of the spear attack from Scorpion in Mortal Kombat with the, get over here. But yeah, it's just basically you attack someone a little bit further away, bring them in, and give them an attack at melee distance, which is really good for her. It can be dealing even more damage. Finally, she has the Fury Ride, which can cost her 1 of her materials, and you and up to 2 other allies in a 4 hex radius gain a move action. So that is useful if you need to get some movement done, but I wouldn't want to just plow through those material tokens, eliminating the armor that she brings to the table. And continuing the Mad Max inspirations, we have John Rutledge, which is a pretty good stand-in for Immortum Joe, again, from Fury Road. He's got the 3 engineering, the 1 hacking, and the 1 hacking defense, 1 in both attack masteries, a 4 movement, 1 shield, and a whopping 7 health. So he's got some staying power as well. Especially when you consider his Stim Mask ability. After each defense roll, before receiving damage, he can spend 1 energy to restore 1 hit point. This is a legitimately good reason to load up energy on John Rutledge in any round you think he may be getting multiple attacks, because it can really keep him on the table if he can keep healing as he's getting attacked. Into his abilities here, he's got the Dead Dust Shotgun, range 4, but it is handy with 5 attack dice. That handy makes it a really good weapon. He also has the Gore Hook, which has a range of 7, and continues the sort of Mortal Kombat / Scorpion theme of throwing a hook at your opponent and dragging them towards you. On damage, you move the target to any hex adjacent to your front half using the shortest path. So he doesn't get the free attack this time, but if he uses this Gore Hook first to get an enemy that's more than 4 away, he can then pull them in and use this Dead Dust Shotgun, as it is handy. Then he has the Vitex Sharpener, which the on-damage effect of your next Gore Hook attack becomes an after attack. So you don't actually have to do damage to drag them to your front arc. And finally, he has the Ruler of the Desert ability. When an enemy in a 2 hex radius performs an attack or defense roll, you may change 1 skull / deflect result to an energy result in it. So basically just taking one of their hits or defenses away and makes them have to use an energy to change it back. We have the QB Turna, which is now inspired by Tina Turner's character in the Thunderdome movie, the 3rd Mad Max movie. Doesn't quite have her likeness there, but the inspiration is pretty clear with the name and all. And I'm guessing the QB is supposed to stand for quarterback, because that's the role she plays for this in this faction. She really can help move the other pieces around while trying to stay out of the harm's way herself. She has a 1 for engineering, a 3 hacking, and 1 hacking defense, no mastery, the standard movement of 4, no armor, and a health of 5. Her passive ability is Front Woman. QB Turna can spend energy tokens off of allies in a 5 hex radius as if it were her own. So this means you don't have to load her up as long as she's going to be close to other friendly characters, and she won't have to, waste energy by leaving it on her that never gets used. Excuse me. So she also has her 1 and only attack, the Mic Drop, which isn't awesome with 3 dice, but it does the 2 damage, so that's pretty good. So if this attack destroys the target, all allies in a 4 hex radius gain 1 energy. Nothing wrong with that. More energy is always better. Then she has 3 different abilities here. All of them cost an action, but no energy. So she can have one ally in an 8 hex radius gain 1 energy. That's not the best, but maybe you'll find times when it's useful. The high C, one ally in the 8 hex radius gains an attack action, which is probably her best ability, but she also has the March, which one ally in the 8 hex radius gains a move action. So the moving and attacking, those can be really useful for getting that extra third action out of some of your characters, while sacrificing QB Turna's ability. But if you leave her 8 hexes behind the front lines of the battle, she can be getting those attacks without being at risk herself. And finally, we have the Wild Child, which would be inspired by the Feral Child, again, from the third Mad Max movie. There's been a bit of a gender swap here. It's a little girl instead of a little boy. And clothed a little differently. The boy in the movie was very feral, dressed in just animal skins. Well, she has sort of a typical Wastelander gear. And the little helmet on her sort of makes me think of the little girl in the Aliens movie, the second movie in that series, Newt, who was wearing the Marine helmet and sort of being rescued by Ripley. I'm not sure if that's intentional, it just brings me there, whereas it's a female character with that big military helmet. Regardless, we have the Wild Child. She is great engineering at 3, pretty good hacking at 2, but no hacking defense. She has a melee mastery of 0, range mastery 1, standard move of 4, 1 armor, and only 3 health. But that 3 health, she does have a little more survivability despite that 3 health, as she has small target. Enemies that target Wild Child with an attack or a charge from a range of higher than 4 have to spend 1 energy before they attack. So they've got to waste an energy just to be able to attack her when they're beyond 4 away. Which makes her sort of less of a priority, I guess, sometimes from your opponent. Her dirty trick attack. So if you are attacking from behind, you attack with a critical strike and the target cannot change armor results to save. So dirty tricks. So the fact that she's getting critical strike with 2 damage, that could be a really good attack. She could easily drop 4 on an opponent sometimes. That would be great. Much like the counterpart in the movie, there's a boomerang involved here. The Feral Child in the Mad Max movies definitely threw the boomerang and actually killed some of the main enemy characters. So yeah, she can throw it for range 8, and on damage she can attack again. So getting 2 of those attacks would be great. And then she has the Junkrat ability, which does cost her an action, but she can activate an adjacent neutral unit. So you can get the sentry guns out, or perhaps even the CED, the large mech, out and use it to your advantage. And finally, she has light and agile. She cannot receive more than 1 damage from a single attack, but she cannot restore hit points. So that gives her some survivability, again, when you think she only has the 3 hit points. She does have 1 armor. It's more difficult for them to attack her from farther range, and when they do a big hit, she's only going to take 1 damage at a time, so she should be able to get several rounds out of her. Alright, we've moved beyond the Mad Max-inspired characters onto the Vin Diesel character from Pitch Black, and then the Chronicles of Riddick. I only saw Pitch Black, so that's where I always identify this character as, but I'm pretty sure I've heard the Riddick movies are pretty good too. I just never got into them. And then, well, speaking of more Vin Diesel movies, he's got the Fast and Fury attack, but, subtle if nothing else. His engineering is 2, his hacking is 1, his no hacking defense, 1 for melee mastery, but no range mastery, movement of 4, no armor, 5 health. He's got his sick blades, which he can attack twice with. They have critical strike, and when he does damage, he applies damage over time. And those damage over time tokens will add a damage to the enemy at the end of the round for each token. So if he attacks twice, he could potentially be applying 2 damage over time tokens to the enemy. He has this engineering ability that will cost him 1 material, but the Sandstorm Generator, until the end of the round, all hexes adjacent to you are treated as high barriers for the purpose of checking visibility and ranged attacks. I think that will use some language clarification. Just because it says all hexes adjacent to you sounds like you as a player, but I'm pretty sure that means just Diesel the character. I don't think that helps all of your characters in 1 round. I would bet on that, but still I could see people arguing that, and it's worth getting clarified. Diesel has protective goggles, so he is immune to blind. The goggles do something. And then he has Try Me. While Vin Diesel. While Diesel was not yet activated in this round, he can choose change one armor result to a save in every defense. So he doesn't have an armor of his own, but this ability means he'll always be able to change one until he activates in the round. So again, another reason for a character to try to act later in the round, if not at the end. And Jameer. Now this character was featured in the 2020, or the most recent, I think it was 2020, it could have been 2021, version of the Dune movie. He is one of the Freeman characters that actually challenges the main character to a duel. So he's got 2 engineering, 1 hacking defense. He's got the 2 melee mastery, which makes sense. He is a duelist. No range mastery. Movement of 4, 1 armor, 5 health. He fights with the Toxin Dagger, which gives him critical strike, and on damage, he applies 1 DO damage over time token for each damage dealt. So again, those damage over time tokens will be taken off at the end of, or will be taken health off at the end of each round. He's got this Furious Assault, so his next melee attack this turn has +1 die, and you can change all energy results to hits in it. So that doesn't cost you an action, but it does cost you an energy. But it does seem really useful to use that just about every round. That extra dice and the ability to change all energy results to hits makes sense to me. He's got the Sand Riser, so he applies blind to all enemies in a 2 hex radius and this can be used in combat. So a little bit of theme with the Borderlands crew between making the best use of blind combined with adding a lot of damage over time tokens. And it's nice to see those sort of like themes threaded through the faction. Finally, he's got the Honorable Duel, which seems like a really powerful ability. Jameer cannot be targeted by attack actions if another enemy has already attacked him this round. So once one enemy attacks him, he's, I guess, invalid as a target for the rest of the round. I do question the wording on this again. I assume that that's only while there are other characters in play. And I assume that they could fix that with a little text, like while Ymir is not the only character on the board, then the rest of the text applies. So next up we have another sort of Fremen-styled soldier from the Dune universe. He came out in the same Patreon month as Jameer before this, but I don't think he's based on any actual character from the movie, despite having a name. I certainly don't remember him if he does, but I think he's just got the styling of their soldiers. So he's got a 2 in engineering, a 1 for hacking, and 2 for hacking defense. 1 in each attack mastery, a 4 for movement, 1 armor, 5 health. These are feeling very sort of standard stats for this faction. He's got his Sudden Strike ability here, that when Mark uses a ranged attack against an enemy on a hex that is in a straight line extending from his front edge, he attacks with critical strike. So similar to like the Overwatch angle, it's that direct line from your front edge. So when you're sniping characters in that range, you get critical strike, which is great. No, all your naturally rolled skulls cannot be blocked. He also has a Poison Blade for melee attacks, and on damage he'll apply a damage over time token. He has his sniper rifle, that self-made shotgun I'm going to assume was carried over from Liza Thorne's character, that she has that weapon as well. And I'm pretty sure that's just an error. He has some sort of sniper rifle. Range 13 and ignoring cover, which is a nice bonus. Has 1 armor penetration. Then he has the Echolocator, which turns your next range attack into a seeking weapon, which means you do not need line of sight. So if you're unable to take advantage of that front edge attack, maybe it's useful to use this to be able to attack a character around a corner. And finally, he has Sudden Strike again. One of these abilities is likely going to get a name change, but when Mark attacks an enemy that has not yet been activated this round, that enemy cannot spend energy to change the energy results to save. So you can pick and choose your targets to try and find what's going to be the easiest kill for you. And now I'm thinking I'm getting into the characters that are not actually inspired from any cinematic universe, at least none that I recognize. So here we have Breaker, who has a metallic skull mask and a chain sort of leash from his wrist to his throat, and he's got a skull knife at his waist. and a pretty cool looking flail attached to a wrench handle here. He was one of my preferred characters from this lot. I actually got most of the base Borderlands crew as part of Patreon long before Gridwars 1 was even released. And even back then, he was one of my favorite characters in the set. He just has a lot of style that I really like. And so I was happy to see him carried over into the game. So he's got his masochism ability. So Breaker gains 1 energy for each damage received. And I was sort of hesitating there as I was reading that because I couldn't recall before my little preamble on liking this guy if I had gone through these stats, and I don't think I had. So he's got the 2 in engineering, none for hacking, 1 for hacking defense, 1 in each mastery, 4 for movement, 5 for health. If I doubled up on that, I do apologize. But yeah, so when he attacks, he gains an energy. So you may not have to put as much energy into him. If you know he's going to be taking some attacks, he may be able to benefit from those after being attacked. He has his heavy flail for a melee attack. The target cannot change armor results to save, so that's pretty good. It only has the 2 dice though. He also has the laser gun for template 6 beam, so everyone in the straight row can get hit by it with 3 dice and 1 armor penetration. He can spend some of his material tokens for this engineering ability for have your next heavy flail attack this turn gains AoE 2. So basically you'll be swinging at guys a little further away from you and sort of, punish your opponent for clustering up his units. Finally, he has the skull knife. So after he successfully charges an enemy, apply weakness to that enemy. Just a nice little bonus. Anytime you get little bonuses from charging or moving, that don't count as an attack, it's nice to see that. Again, really cool model. And again, on the affordable side, 24, he's one that should fit into most lists because he doesn't bring quite as much to the table, but a lot of the prior units were in the mid-30s up to 40, so they were a lot more expensive. Then we have Chandra, which is a somewhat recent Patreon release from Cyberforge. She's part of their sort of rat character line, and she looks pretty cool, quite unique from the rest of them. Everything else has been sort of more humanoid, but Gridwars goes a little more fantastical, and I think she fits in just nicely with the Borderlands crew. She has 2 engineering, 1 hacking, and 1 hacking defense. She has a 2 melee mastery with 1 ranged mastery, a movement of 4, which I thought with her small size and being a rat, she might have had a movement of 5, but I guess not. 1 armor and 4 life. She has her binoculars ability, which all ranged attacks performed against enemies in an 8 hex radius from Chandra have ignore cover, so always good. They won't be able to as easily change their energy to blocks. So Chandra has the sneaky knife, which on damage applies weakness, and after attack you can dash 2. So that dash 2 out of combat is a good way of keeping her alive, especially when we see here a little bit later. But it's 2 dice, nothing crazy, but it's that getting away is what the bigger factor is. She also has the Bee Blaster, which is a range 6 plasma weapon, so she can overcharge it at risk of taking damage herself. Finally, she also has the Rat Controller, which is target enemy in range 8, and it receives 1 hit and apply weakness, or spot it to it. So I'm guessing in my mind, like she's sending out this rat to do a bite, is what I'm picturing with the Rat Controller, which I kind of love thinking of it that way. Finally, she has Scatter, and this is where her sneaky knife comes into play, where after an enemy attacks her with a melee attack, she gains a sneaky knife attack action against it. So regardless of whether she hits or not, after that first melee attack, she's going to dash 2. And if she's attacked or being attacked by an enemy who only has melee attacks, that's going to move her beyond the range of his attack. So he's going to have to risk a charge or a move again in order to get back into melee range. Here we have the Slave Master Shmrag, a name that doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but he's a really cool looking figure. Not necessarily from any film or anything, but he fits in well with the theme that we've seen thus far. He has 2 under his engineering, none for hacking and 2 for hacking defense, 1 melee mastery, but a whopping 3 for ranged mastery, which is nice to see. He's got a 4 for movement, 1 for armor, and a 6 health. He also has this great ability, Mine Eater. So when a mine would deal damage to Smrag, he restores 1 hit point instead. So not only does he have to avoid, or not have to avoid mines, but he can actually target being the one to detonate them and heal himself on the way through. And that's a great ability to have. Especially though you could detonate the mine while you are adjacent to an enemy, and they will probably wind up taking a hit while you heal a hit. So, win-win. He's got his Talon Palm, so it's got critical strike, 3 dice and 1 damage. But then he has, more interestingly, the Staff of Control, which is his only range attack, but he has a range mastery of 3, so he's really good with this weapon. And on damage, he can apply stun and move the target 4 hexes. So you can use that to really reposition them, whether it's moving them into melee with one of your opponents, or with one of your models, or moving them out of melee with one of your models. There's not a lot of repositioning outside of throws that goes on in this game, so this seems like a very unique and powerful ability that really brings something new to the table that not a lot of other models have. He also has the Deafening Warcry. Apply weakness to all enemies in a 3-hex radius, and to all enemies with no energy in a 6-hex radius. So applying that weakness lowers their weapon masteries, and it's a real benefit, so their attacks are not as good. As well, he has the Rule of Terror, which I quite like. After an enemy uses a melee attack against Smrag, it cannot use another melee attack other than basic attack until the end of the turn. So, they may have one really good melee attack against you, but then the next one is just going to be the basic, basically a fist punch, which, anytime you're lowering the capability of your opponents, it's doing something good for you. And Tallahassee Cooper. He's another really cool looking model. He's got a great weapon there, a great face with the hat and the monocle or eye patch and the mustachioed face. He's got quite the good engineering skill, but no hacking or defense. 1 melee mastery, 1 range mastery, a movement of 4, 1 armor, 5 health. He's got the Off My Turf passive ability. While Cooper has at least 1 energy, he has Overwatch. So having Overwatch is always great. So I would try to leave an energy on him at the end of his round action, if you could, because it'll just give you board control and the possibility of doing additional damage. Speaking of damage, he's got the minigun here, which has a range 10, so that's a great range. 4 dice, 1 armor penetration, 1 damage. After the attack, your next minigun attack has 2 additional dice, so he'll have 6 dice. So if you're able to stand still and just get 2 attacks, you can get the first one at 4 and the next one at 6. If you have to move in, you can get 1 attack at 6, and then perhaps their next attack might come through the QB Turner character, who can, she can use her ability to take an attack with a friendly character within 8 hexes. So that's another way of getting 2 attacks. Make sure you get that 6 dice attack. He also has the Patriotic Anthem to gain 3 energy, so it's a good chance he'll have that energy left over for Overwatch. And he has the hand-loaded ammo. It costs him all 3 of his starting materials, but your minigun attacks have +1 damage until the end of the round. So +1 damage is 2 damage for each hit. So if you get the 6 dice, and there's a good chance of getting, with his melee mastery 1, he might get 3 or 4 hits, and that 4 hits is going to count as 8 damage. That's worth doing. And it's till the end of the round, which would also include his Overwatch attacks. So even if you have to move yourself and attack yourself, that's both of your actions used up. But your Overwatch attack will have 6 dice. So there's a lot of opportunity to keep him in the game with 2 attacks. And I'm really looking forward to trying to get those 6 dice with the 2 damage. I think that could be a game changer and catch your opponent off guard. He has also a rodeo buff, so enemies adjacent to Cooper cannot use the throw action. That'll have to be strategic in order to actually make use of that, I think. But it's got some power there, especially if you're facing, an enemy who has a clearly a much higher health skill, and you can probably throw everyone around. But Cooper will prevent that from happening. And finally, we have Tex, who has no inspiration that I know of, but still a cool looking figure. Another great engineer, as we've often seen through much of the Borderlands crew. They've been better engineers than hackers, and he's no different with no hacking ability, but a little bit of hacking defense. He has the 1 melee mastery, a 2 for range mastery, 4 move, 2 armor, and 5 health. He is a survivalist, so when Tex has cover against a range attack, the attack also gets 1 less die. So cover will allow him to change all energy to deflections, and they'll be attacking with 1 less dice, so he's helping him survive. So you should be trying to play him in cover to really take advantage of that ability. He's got a skinning knife for his melee attack, which has critical strike. It's only 2 dice, but that's his focus from melee. But his bigger focus is his range 9 machine gun, the hunting machine gun, which will attack with 2 additional dice if the target's health statistic is higher than 5. So the bigger the character, the better you can hit him. So if he has 6 health or above, you'll be attacking with 5 dice, which is pretty good. He can also use his materials to turn his next range attack into a plasma weapon, which will give you an additional dice with the risk of taking damage on your blank rolls. And finally, he has this Cortex mapping. When an ally in a 4 hex radius becomes a target of a direct attack, Tex gains an energy. So just know who your best units for getting hacked are, and maybe keep Tex within a bit of a range there, and you can benefit when you get targeted like that. So that's going to be the end of the review of the Borderlands crew. I think they're really fun. They were sort of an add-on faction in Gridwars 1.0, but I think they sort of fit the style of the game. They're not really as big a part of the grid. They kind of live on their own in the wastelands, and maybe they even sort of dislike the grid and people who are all about the grid, but they go in there to cause their own level of havoc.